Good evening and welcome to the NDTV Dialogues, a conversation of ideas. This week we are looking at something which is a headline every day in our newspapers, on our television channels, about girls being stalked, raped, murdered, acid attacks. In fact, it's almost becoming something which is numbing us as a society. Yet once in a while a case comes along which makes us start a national conversation. The case of Varnika Kundu in Chandigarh was one like that, and I'm very happy to have on the show tonight Varnika and her father Virinder Kundu, who are joining me. I'm also joined by the Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry, Kiran Bedi, who feels so strongly about this that she's spoken up publicly. I'm also joined by Pinky Anand, Additional Solicitor General of India. Also with me, another very outspoken young woman, Gul Panag. She was an ex-MP candidate also for Chandigarh. Thank you all very much for joining me. Varnika and Mr. Kundu, for both of you, it was something when it happened to you, you thought you'd escaped easily in a sense. I remember in your Facebook post you read, I was lucky. When I read that, I remember thinking that, how could you say that you were lucky? But after that, we've seen the horrific incidents in Chandigarh of a young girl raped in a park. We've seen a girl who was stalked and murdered because no one listened to her complaints in Uttar Pradesh. What would you say today when you've seen the national conversation that has started? What would you like to see change?
It's just the status of women in the country. It's as simple as that. We're treated like second-class citizens who for some reason don't have the same rights that a man does. I mean, you know, for instance, take my case. The first thing a lot of people questioned was, why was she out at night? Why should I be questioned for it? If I have the same rights as any other man who's my age and, you know, living in the same society, why should I be questioned for what I was doing when it's okay for a man to do it? So I think that is the biggest thing that we need to change. Someone made a very valid point one day and said, you know, if men grow up watching their mothers get beaten at home, how are they ever going to respect a woman? And I think that's true. So
when you read what happened in Chandigarh of that girl in the park, just I think about a week after what happened with you,
yeah.
What was your first reaction?
I was shocked that after all of this happened, I mean, it's been national news for like the last week, and despite all of that, something that horrific can actually happen, and this happened in broad daylight to a girl who was going to school through a park.
On Independence Day. On
Independence Day, which is, I mean, there are so many things wrong with that situation. You know, even one of those things, every single one of those is supposed to be a safe space. It's Independence Day, so there are a lot of cops around. It's a park. It's the middle of the day. She's going to school. And yet something like this happens. It just, honestly, I'm at a loss for words to
Mr. Kundu, you're someone who's been part of the system, the governance of India. India's changing in a sense, 21st century India. We made a lot of progress. Yep. Yet, when you're on the other side of what happened, when your daughter, I mean, again, I don't want to use the word victim here. I think she's a survivor and came out very strongly. When your daughter was saved from perhaps something much worse that could have happened that night, how did you find yourself? Did you feel as helpless as any other father in your situation? Did you see perhaps how people look at government, police situations when they're just a common citizen or an Aam Aadmi?
See, my personal reaction that time was when she rang up, when she had just reached home and actually escaped those goons. My first reaction was that I actually was completely empowered, you know, that my daughter is safe. If she had not been safe, if something had happened to her that night, for me, life would have changed in a completely different way. So when she came back home, I felt enormously powerful, and then I felt that now we must take on these people and bring the whole thing to its logical conclusion, because now she is safe. This is the biggest gift that God has given me, and it's about time I stood up and brought those boys to justice. What I feel is, you know, why is there such a huge perpetration of this kind of crimes now? Is because we have such a beautifully codified law. Probably the harshest law in the world is in India, but the law enforcement is really something to be, you know, looked at, because enforcement is not there and the fear of enforcement is not there.
Did you face that as well? As an IS officer, you faced that. Of course, the other person in this was a politician's son, but did you face the feeling that the enforcement was not what you would have liked as the father of a girl who got through this?
See, I am going through the whole process. This is the first time I have come into this kind of a process. You know, the first time I actually went to a police station as a complainant. As a district magistrate, I have inspected police stations. I have inquired into, say, custodial deaths and things like that. But this was a completely different thing. And it was a deliberate choice on my part also, because I did not ring up a single officer in the Chandigarh administration that day. I wanted to feel what it means to go there as a father of a daughter and actually lodge a complaint, and what is it that the police is actually going to do to me. For me, it's a test case. You know, I've been a part of the system for 30 years. I have been able to stand up to pressure and deliver what was expected of me. I feel that way. I don't think there is, you know, with the kind of protection that is given to a civil servant in this country, there is absolutely no reason why they should succumb to any kind of a pressure.
But I want to ask, in fact, I want to bring in Ms. Kiran Bedi. And Ms. Bedi, you are a constitutional head, which is why I really applaud the fact that you spoke out on this case and said also that you felt that the police should have acted differently. And we all know that the non-bailable offence of attempt to abduction was only added later, perhaps because of the media focus on the case. We don't know, but it was only added later. What would you say on how this case was handled, given the unique situation that it's actually between a civil servant's family and a politician's family?
I would like to see a change the way boys are brought up. I think they're growing up with the feeling that they can get away with everything. And secondly, if they belong to privileged classes, rich classes, then they can buy justice. I think they are absolutely, I think there's something seriously wrong in the way we are bringing up our boys, and particularly with the privileged families. But it's equally wrong equally with the other classes, because same thing happens with the slums. I think a stage is coming when parents are almost scared of their boys. When they're growing up, they're scared of the boys. Will the boys not run away? If they discipline them, then they might just run away. They fear that boys will run away. So I think this is something which must change, the way we are parenting our boys. Now I'm going to come back to the police issue if you want me to answer. Yes. Police went horribly wrong. When she went to police make a complaint, the safest thing for the police is to record the complaint as it is, and then immediately take up action. I think that's where they went wrong, that they decided to bide time and somehow got overawed with the privileged status of this boy, and which they had to retrieve a lot later on. So safest for police as a rule should be very predictable, that if a woman is coming to make a complaint, they must take it as it is and follow up as is demanded. The cases of sections of law can always be changed later. They can be amended later, added on, subtracted. But it's better to take the complaint as it is and deal with it as it comes. That's the safest and securest way of dealing with crimes against women.
Two very important points, and I'd like to bring in Pinky Anand, who really is Additional Solicitor General, and before that, as a lawyer who has worked with so many cases of sexual assault. The issue of the script, as Gulpanag was pointing out, is often followed. First, everybody says, oh, this is very bad. Then somehow it becomes Varnika's fault. Then it becomes Varnika's parents' fault. Then it becomes about, oh, and this again across political lines, though in this case there was a BABUL SUPRIYO'S that had been misquoted, who said, you know, that maybe this was just the boy chase girl thing. Another leader who will put out a photograph of Varnika at some friends and say, look, there's another side to the story. That's something, I mean, Kiran Kher said she's ashamed to be in the same party as that BJP leader who said that, you know, what was she doing out at night? What would you say when you hear of all this?
I agree with you, Sonia. I mean, this is an absolutely preposterous situation that, as even Varnika was saying, the first question that is asked of her is, what was she doing out? Why was she out at night? And this is not the first time this has happened. In all such cases, this is the script that runs across board, and all the girls are questioned as to what they have done, why they have done. So the script has to really change. The question of equality that Varnika was bringing out is one of those features. And I think it's not only, you know, when we talk about these kind of situations, it's not only law, but the social perceptions. Girls versus boys, patriarchy, the idea that boys can have fun, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, we've heard preposterous statements made by so many people, and frankly, it really hits you very hard whenever such situations come. So it is great to have people like Varnika who actually come forth with the system, fight the system, and show everybody the way. I enjoyed what she said about mentoring. You know, none of us know how much mentoring we can do or we are capable of doing till actually the act is done, and there are, for every Varnika, there will be a 1 lakh Varnikas that will be standing up and saying, I can do it. Whether I do it, I don't do it, whether such a situation happens or doesn't happen. But yes, it proves a point and takes you miles forward.
But Mr. Kundu made that point that our law is the toughest in the world. But look at it from the legal system. Our convictions are abysmal. The latest figures show they're lower than ever before, even though the number of cases reported are higher than ever before. How can that mismatch? Again, now you're a law officer of the government. What's going wrong in our system? You all blamed the Congress government for this, but how is the BJP government changing this?
No, the question is not talking at that surface. In our system, yes, there are low conviction rates. You can't dispute that. That's a matter of record. And for women, it's even worse. There are some reasons for it which you can explain away. For example, the fact that women will not take it forward up to the logical conclusion. Mr. Kundu very categorically said in Varnika, they will take it to the logical conclusion. So you have to have people, survivors, who actually take the system forward to its logical conclusion for it to have a high conviction rate. A number of such cases just drop out because people are either scared or don't want the ignominy of running through such a trial, whether of assault or rape or stalking or voyeurism, any of these kind of offences, and that's one of the reasons. But aside from that, the real question of low conviction rates is something that we need to address for sure. I mean, we can't survive in a system where you don't have accountability. You won't have deterrence till you have not only conviction, speedy justice, fast track courts, and all these features put together to ensure that next time somebody thinks of attacking a person like Varnika, they are scared at that point itself to say, if I do this, this is the consequences that will flow irrespective of who I am or irrespective who Varnika is.
No, but that is the irony that I think perhaps this Mr. Barala's son would never have done it if he knew Varnika was a senior IAS officer's daughter, and that's actually the tragedy of this case in a way, Gul. And I remember the Prime Minister read forth speech where he talked very eloquently about how the sons need to be asked where they go at night. In Haryana, you've got the famous Beti Bachao Andolan, which all of us use really about how it had been translated into Beta Bachao. And the difference between rhetoric and reality is very striking here. And perhaps you could talk a bit more about that as somebody who entered the political system, but also find that this happens across political mindsets.
As we were discussing earlier before we came on to the studio floor, Sonia, I think firstly, this attitude of trying to victim shame and to pin the whole fault on the victim in a case like this, and I don't want to use the word victim, but I'm using this as a generalized term when a lot of other situations like this happens or incidents happen, is that the patriarchal mindset that exists in society finds its way into institutions, finds its way into law enforcement, and unfortunately also finds its way into our courtrooms, which are the holiest shrine which is meant to uphold the Constitution. Now, when the law enforcement mechanism of the state is compromised in terms of the way it views a case because it's got a patriarchal filter, everything is going to go wrong. Now, while society since its inception has been patriarchal, but it has been challenged, and in places where it has been challenged and challenged consistency for decades, there has been a semblance of equality. Now, there are people who probably won't accept women as their equals, and they'll probably hold that thought behind inside their mind, but to make sure that law is strong enough that where that person can't practice his patriarchal and his gender non-neutral policies, whether it's at work, whether it's in the courthouse, or whether it's in a police station, is where we must aim towards. Now, while what Madam Bedi said is absolutely spot on, we need to bring up our boys better. But anthropological studies show that 3 generations is the earliest we can see any kind of change. That's 45 years. So we must start. Of course, it's a very, very important thing. We need to reform the educational system where you show men and women as individuals with equal status and equal access to opportunity legally, socially, politically, economically, and they're brought up like that. Yes. When a school textbook is NCERT class 2 textbook, I remember somebody pointing it out to me, daddy goes to office, mama goes to kitchen. I'm not fighting these stereotypes while they should be fought, but the point is, one is that level. The second level is we need to have a consistent movement at the grassroots and at the top where we constantly do advocacy of equality, and it's very easy for this equality to go into a negative space because the custodians of patriarchy are those who don't want this apple cart upset. Exactly. And therefore feminism acquires a negative connotation when the dictionary definition of feminism is equal access to opportunity, equal rights, etc., etc. Now, that's the second problem. The advocacy must continue at all times for the next 3 decades if we are to see results. But in the interim period, and I just take a moment, and of course, Madam Anand and Madam Bedi are far more qualified than me, her having been a police officer and she, of course, being an officer of the court. The fact remains that in the meantime, are we going to continue for the next 45 years, see our women violated, our girls violated forever? The law enforcement has to step up. Our police has to be more gender sensitive. They need to be told and taught and trained that this is not the way you address address from a privileged position of patriarchy, a woman victim.
No, and I think the irony is that actually stalking became a legal offence only after the Nirbhaya case. In fact, before that, stalking wasn't even an offence. And even though it's an offence now, it is bailable. I mentioned the case of 17-year-old Ragini in Uttar Pradesh, stalked for months, then actually brutally killed on her way home from school. Her schoolmates said they didn't speak out because they were scared. In Mumbai, stalking. Again, today in Delhi, we'll report a fresh instance of stalking. Why is it, and Varnika, I wanted to bring you in on that. Why is it that these headlines almost fail to shock anymore? In fact, after your case became public, another young girl came out who said that she'd actually been physically abducted and molested by some other boys from the Barala family, but her case just disappeared. And she's actually been emboldened by the fact that you came out and is filing a fresh complaint. Yeah. Did that make you sad?
Well, it made me sad that it happened to her. I mean, I could have suffered the same fate, but I didn't. And she actually did. She went through all of that. But I was actually nothing but glad that, you know, if nothing else comes of this, just the fact that she has felt empowered enough that she can step up and actually raise her voice again and talk about how something happened to her and actually expect and ask for justice.
And hopefully get justice this time, because the focus hopefully will be on this as well.
Hopefully, yeah. So I think that's a great thing. Even if one person's life changes a little bit because of this, that's, you know, more real change than we see a lot of times. And as far as stalking, I think we've grown up being very used to stalking. We didn't even think it was a thing, like you said. It wasn't even a thing in India. And I mean, I don't want to blame pop culture, but it's not like pop culture has helped.
You're a DJ, in fact. So when you see the Punjabi songs that are coming out nowadays, when you see, which almost makes stalking fun. I mean, as I said, even BABUL SUPRIYO' made that point. He said, look, it's about boy chase girl. This is about what is in movies. You know, let's not take it all, so make it about attempted kidnapping.
Well, in an interview, he was also talking about how he has an 18-year-old daughter. And I actually questioned that if the same thing had happened to his daughter instead of me, would he have tweeted what he tweeted? It's not. It's an attempt to trivialize everything. It's an attempt to trivialize all the crimes against women that we face. I mean, I can't believe this is a crime. It's a real crime, stalking. But till a few years ago, it wasn't. So,
and Shaina NC also tweeted a picture of you with some of your friends, which she then deleted and said was hacked. But does that make you feel ever that, did you ever think that, why did I complain? Why get this headache on my head?
No, I mean, attempts like that, I wouldn't say they victim shamed me. I would say they attempted to do it, but it was ridiculous. I mean, I can't even begin to point out the number of things that were wrong with that attempt that they did. And it's ridiculous. It stems from the mindset that, you know, we are trying to change, because if a man and a woman are equal, then we should be able to do the exact same things and not be questioned for it. So that just, I feel honestly, I didn't really pay too much heed to all the attempted victim shaming and character assassination, because I have already grown up. I have been brought up with very different values. I have been brought up as a person, not just as a girl, or, you know, not just as a gender, as, you know, someone of a certain gender. So I've been brought up as a person, and I don't think any of these things are relevant, which is probably a big part of why I can actually sit here today not having actually, you know, suffered harm at the hands of those goons and talk about these things.